Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Hazzed, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys my favorite spec for 7.2.5 Frost DK PvP. Now, it ended up being something I definitely didn't expect. So anyways, guys, stick around. Let's jump into this.
It's who we are, it's what we do, we've come so far, and now we pay the price, so don't even cry. The world is breaking down, and I cannot leave the ground.
Before we start off this video, I'd like to say that Breath Spec is still going to be the best way to go for Arena, as it'll give you the biggest opening gate for landing kills. So kind of 2 videos ago I kind of did a PvP guide about that. But this is going to be my favorite spec for Battlegrounds and for all around producing as much damage as possible. Two things I obviously like to do. This spec will also give you a better opening for healing and a lot more runic power for healing to stay alive inside of PvP combat on a Frost DK. So this was what I'd say is kind of like my brawling spec. This can keep up with Affliction Warlocks, it can keep up with Boomies, it can keep up with Unholy DKs. Surprisingly, I can beat most Unholy DKs using this spec. So I'll go ahead and teach you guys how this spec works, why it works, and what you're supposed to do with this spec to get it to produce the maximum amount of damage. So obviously I'm going to show you the talents right away. I'm going to start off with the level 56 talent Shattering Strikes. Now here's where things get kind of weird, and it's really going to throw you off, and I really didn't understand it until I kind of played the spec for a bit, looked back over all the buffs and nerfs going on with the Frost DKs, and kind of ended up where I'm at. So as I'm outside of combat right now, I'm basically wearing a full item level set on my Frost DK. I don't care about my offsets or anything, but I'll go over and I'll hit this attack dummy. Now these are like normalized in PvP stats right now, and you notice we have very little mastery, so I realized, well, maximizing frost damage is probably not the best idea, also being that Howling Blast was nerfed by another 16%, but what they did do was increase our damage by 3% all around, which buffed up a lot of the other abilities such as Frost Strike and Obliterate. And of course, with the major mastery nerf that happened earlier on with Frost DKs, I can imagine while looking at these PvP stats, we have a high amount of crit and a high amount of haste, which when it comes to PvE is how we keep consistent DPS and kind of keep a full rotation on a target. So I kind of got to thinking a little bit, well, what if I actually relied on my overall rotation instead of just maximizing burst inside BGs and things like that? And hopefully I can find some kind of medium where I can keep a lot of burst while getting a really strong amount of consistency out to keep up with a lot of other classes, because that was something I was having a pretty hard time doing with the breath spec if I didn't have a healer on me or my burst got shut down, something like that. And with this spec, you really don't have to worry about your burst and things getting shut down, as for it's a extremely elongated burst. So yeah, we're starting out with Shattering Strikes, and also being that the nerf kind of happened and the buff kind of happened and I got my artifact traits maxed out, my Frost Strike, when the main hand and the offhand both crit, is actually our largest damaging ability on Frost DKs in PvP at the moment. I know, kind of shocking, right? But after I rattled off an 800k and a 900k, I really started to look closer at Frost Strikes, and I kind of seen what was going on. So what I'm doing here is relying, of course, on a more consistent DPS. As for the level 57 talent, still running Freezing Fog, as the Howling Blast still hits for around 500 plus K, and the Frost Fever damage also deals quite a bit of DPS. It's, you know, kind of our AoE bread and butter for hitting those high numbers, I guess. But you're also going to want to keep the increased damage for that Howling Blast. Like, it's undodgeable, completely amazing, kind of like that Frost Strike that's now ranged. So that's something that this spec I can definitely tell you is a bit better, is there's a lot of strong plate classes right now, and Frost Strike, relying on those big crits, actually straight up hits through those, which has given me a bigger opening to kill a lot of targets, and it's ended up being quite surprising, great consistency, and you know, get a lot of KBs with it, surprisingly. The level 58 talent is going to be Hungering Rune Weapon. You're like, Hungering Rune Weapon without a breath spec? I know, crazy, right? Basically what you do with this spec, as you can see I'm using Gathering Storms as the level 90 talent, is you have the same same opener, kind of like you're going to breath somebody. But basically what you can do with this spec is pre-open burst, throw out Remorseless Winter, stack it up with Obliterate as fast as you can. You need to make sure you're at least stacked up to 5 times before you start dropping your Frost Strike, so it gets that 40% increased damage. So you've got that intense Gathering Storms ticking on the target. Now remember, you couldn't combine these two to begin with in the past because Gathering Storms wasn't mechanically inclined to play this way. So what I'm doing is maximizing that Gathering Storms burst with the Shattering Strikes going on, and then of course after I don't have any runes, I follow it up with the Empowered Rune Weapon, still keep those Obliterates going on to elongate that Remorseless Winter, and drop those big Frost Strikes on the target, hitting them for 700 to 900k if they crit. Generally they'll hit 5, 6, 700k, but it's still pretty strong coming off for any basic attack on a Frost DK, and the amount of consistency it gives you on a target is absolutely insane because as we know at the beginning of the expansion, Rune of Razor Eyes was not working correctly. It was not stacking on the targets. As of right now, it stacks fairly fast, and you can drop 5-stack Frost Strikes, over and over and over again. And the last thing I'm running is Obliteration, because after you hit that peak with Remorseless Winter, you're dropping out those Frost Strikes. You don't actually dump Frost Strikes. You use it periodically with your Obliterates. So when you get to that point, you slap on that so you can hit a Frost Strike, dump off 5 targets, hit an Obliterate, that's a guaranteed crit, and you could either go back to Frost Strikes, or you could hit another Obliterate and wait till you get 5 stacks and then go back to the Frost Strike. So there's a couple tricky little things you can do with this rotation that's not really set in stone, but I found different ways to go about doing things that really play out well when it comes to PvP combat. As for honor talents, I'm using, at the moment, there are a lot of strong casters. I'm not as scared of melee at the moment as much as I was, so I'm using anti-magic zone as I end up being an initiator a lot, and that's the reason I'm using Frozen Center to hold a lot of people still with this spec. And that's one of the things you got to realize is you're still generating a lot of AoE, even more AoE than you would be using Avalanche or Frost Scythe or anything like that, because you're still got the Freezing Fog going on, you still got the procs rolling out, and you're going to get a lot more of that from the Hungering Rune Weapon. Now you'll also notice I'm using, down at the bottom of the Honor Talents, Overpowered Rune Weapon, which is going to give us a 1-minute cooldown on that. So as you're starting to see what's going on here is we have a extremely powerful 1-minute cooldown that comes with a gnarly burst with our Frost Strikes, and during this we don't have to completely dump our runing power into the burst like we do with breath, so it's going to give us more options to stay alive, to change up, to kite, to drop back, to switch to a different target, things like that. So we don't have to completely go headstrong in and kill things. I've literally been playing this spec all day, just enjoying the absolute heck out of it, and I've been messing around with a lot of things. I wanted to make some videos using this spec actually last week on the bonus battleground, because that was something I really did enjoy, was the brawl. I wish that was a normal battleground going on, because right now I'm recording on my old PC. The new one kind of decided that the USB ports went out. I don't know what's going on with the drivers there, but I had to order some old PS2 mouse and keyboard so I could actually hopefully get inside of it and figure out what's going on with those USB ports, which is weird. And I got the old PC working with some of the newer programs that I got, but it's still a hit and miss on the audio and things like that. I've got to work with it a bit, but hopefully within the next 2-3 days I'll have that thing work, and again I'll be able to record more VG footage. Surprisingly, I got this one working at 60 FPS, but back to the video, guys. Alright, so we got talents, we got honor talents down. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys exactly how you go about rotating these cooldowns, how you go about this, why it's so good with the way it's set up, because you get a strong burst at the get-go. Any fight you get into, you get a strong elongated burst consistently throughout the whole battleground, and for the most part with this spec, I'll put out 100 mil plus every battleground. Like, very seldomly do I ever get shut down enough to the point, even when losing, that I don't put out over 100 mil. It's quite an amazing spec. So anyways, guys, let's go ahead and jump over to some rotation. So the reason I kind of seeked out this spec was I didn't like how long it took to really generate a full burst when it came to breath spec, and I really found like a lot of classes have a lot of CC and they just kind of shrugged it off when it came to BG scenarios. So I really wanted to do that, and I really wanted to up my AoE damage. So what we got here is we're going to start off with a rotation with a little burst macro, and the reason we're doing this is to generate our maximum Remorseless Winter, elongate the the time out. It gives us a lot of stuns. It'll also root targets in place, and it'll give us quite a good opening in the beginning of the fight to deal quite a bit of damage, especially if it's DPS versus DPS. Even if you're chasing down healers, it's going to give you time rooting the other DPS, usually in the area, to get to the target. And of course, if you get to the target, you're going to full burst on the target or something like that. You can go ahead and drop anti-magic zone right on the target you're trying to kill, and then the casters around you aren't going to blow your face up, at least not right away. So anyways, that's why I'm kind of rocking this. We're gonna go ahead. This little macro we got going here is Pillar of Frost, Blood Fury, Remorseless Winter. I'll go ahead and put that in the comments below, or probably in the description, more like it. But anyways, so going over this little macro, what we're going to do with it is we're going to blow it right away. It's going to pop our Remorseless Winter, it's going to use our cooldowns, and we're going to sync Obliterates directly into the target. And whenever we stack up to, of course, 5 stacks of our Razor Ice, we're going to go ahead and start dropping those big old Frost Strikes, the one that hit for 7, 8, 900k, those big Frost Strikes. And we're going to do it quite fast. And soon after that, when we get our first downtime, we're going to throw out Hungering Rune Weapon, and we're also going to throw out Obliteration, because if we can get a good vault between Frost Strike crits and Obliterate crits, you can do millions of damage really fast. Within 4 or 5 attacks, you could just rip through somebody's health if you get the right procs and the right crits. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do that. Alright, so we're encroaching on the target right here, throwing up major cooldowns, syncing out those big Obliterates right now. We're stacking up twice right there, and we're only up to 3. We got 5 right there. We will use that crit proc first, and this is we're going to throw out our Remorseless Winter, our Hungering Rune Weapon, and keep rotating on the target. Whenever we go ahead and get up to, of course, 5 stacks again, we're going to drop those big Frost Strikes. Now, the one thing you're going to notice about this is a lot of classes won't be able to evade the Frost Strike damage coming out to them. It's going to hit the target, whether it's a Pally, whether it's a Feral Druid, whether it's a Rogue. And I'm actually quite excited to see Frost Strike hitting this hard, because it is so hard for other classes to evade the damage. Now, as you can see on my kind of my DPS meter, the damage doesn't seem to be extreme, but what you're not seeing is the amount of cleave damage that this spec is pumping out, along with the single target damage. Of course, all the damage you really can't avoid inside PvP combat. The other nice thing about this spec is you'll notice that you have a 1-minute burst timer on all your abilities. So once that's off, you literally have another burst a minute later. And as you notice, I'm starting to come into some downtime right here, not getting many attacks off. We've already got our Hungering Rune Weapon back up to just lay in another just crazy damage burst. That was about a 700k Frost Strike right there again, being thrown up in the middle of all these major crits going on. And the nice thing about this is I've noticed with the breadth spec, a lot of the time in your off time, a lot of classes will spank you because you don't have the damage to really fight off much of anything. We do have a lot of crit, but just relying alone on our Obliterates and our Howling Blast procs with the large amount of downtime that we'd usually have doesn't seem to play out very well. And the nice thing about using Hungering Rune Weapon, as you can see, is since it lasts 15 seconds and it is over time, it does seem to, you know, give you enough oomph and give you enough runic power to basically make it to your next burst, and having very minimal downtime for any of for this rotation. It actually turns out being pretty crazy. But overall, this is definitely my favorite spec to be playing right now in Battlegrounds, or really just any Battleground situation. Of course, as I said earlier in the video, in Arena I would still be playing the breath spec. I just saw that 648k crit. That was a nice one. Alright, so we got over that rotation. That's kind of quick burst. That's the consistent rotation. You're basically throwing out Remorseless Winter, trying to generate as much procs as you can with your Obliterate to get your Howling Blast procs, and whenever you get 5 stacks of your Razor Ice, you're going to be dropping the Frost Strikes on the target. Now, you notice I always have an excessive amount of runic power with this spec, and that runic power can go into healing, of course. Which is very nice since you're not fully committed within the burst, and you can put those self-heals in on yourself pretty much whenever you want. And of course, if you don't have 5 stacks on the target, you have a very high runic pool. You might as well do that to keep your health up. It's almost like this spec literally gives you extra runic power to heal on when you can't really deal maximized pressure with this spec. Now, should you ever runic dump with this spec? Not very often. There are times that I'm fighting something that I will runic dump, but it doesn't happen very often. As you can see here, I'm just rotating between these two targets. We've got almost like 30% crit, so we're just getting consistent crits with almost both of these weapons, as that 40% Razor Ice is amping up that Frost Strike damage. It's absolutely insane how much damage you can do with this spec, guys, and I hope you enjoyed this little rotation on it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little tutorial video. I wasn't enjoying the normal consistency spec, and I wasn't really enjoying the breadth spec. I needed something with a little bit more consistent damage and a little bit more burst, and this is what I came up with. And I'm actually extremely surprised with the amount of damage this can pump out in BG situations. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please try it out. Let me know down in the comments below if you enjoyed it, if you were good at it, if you figured it out pretty fast, or if you didn't figure it out at all and my video was crap and I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. But anyways, guys, until next time, leave a like. This was your boy Hazzed.